In March 1974, I was invited to play the main role of Romeo in Romeo and Juliet. I had a fantastic drama teacher at the school I was at. I was in the lower sixth at the time, or as you would say these days, year 12. And he'd been looking for someone to play the role of Romeo for some time. Apparently, I had the right look, the image, the age, etc., at the time. But of course, it's never a one-way street when you're talking about Romeo and Juliet. I also had to have a companion, Juliet. And in fact, I had a very good friend who played the role of Juliet called Hilary. And she was my Juliet throughout the play. Now, it had its moments of sheer drama just getting into rehearsal in the play, because Shakespeare is something that everybody seems to fear. I think the students and adults alike fear that the language does not speak, but actually it's a very easy, a very fantastic concept that Shakespeare produced, which is relevant for today. You know, when we talk about the play of Romeo and Juliet, it was tragic, but it was brought on by the older generation. It wasn't the young generation that caused the problem. And over history, how many times have we seen conflicts that have been manipulated and begun by the older generation? And as young children growing up, and as you know, with our parents, we don't often have to follow what they do. We want to do things possibly they didn't do. We learn a lot from our parents, but not always the right things. And of course, Romeo and Juliet was based in Italy, in a beautiful place called Verona. The prologue is fantastic. It's actually, if you want to talk in terminological ways with GCSE English, it's a flashback. It's a flashback story. It's where, you know, we know the end result because the prologue says what's going to happen. So then we, like, as curiosity goes, as public and people, we want to know why these things happened. And of course, Romeo was a young 17-year-old lad who was kind of growing up, didn't really know about life, etc., etc. And 40 was in love with somebody else, probably had an infatuation on a young girl at the same time called Rosalind, who was actually, again, not somebody that he could really follow up on. He was part of the Montagues, Romeo, and there were two families, Montagues and the Capulets, and they were rivals, not so much in status because they had a similar status. And the prologue, so whenever you're looking at Romeo and Juliet, look at the prologue. It tells you the whole story, and then you can pick it all out, and the rest kind of fits into place. But it's very relatable because it's about the situation that had got out of hand between the two families, trying to prove who was the most powerful and the family of choice that people should be part of. And of course, the siblings from each of those, they became, I suppose, like gangs that we have. You know, we have gangs in the UK today and sadly across the world, but it's kind of this territorial thing. You know, look at me and whatever. And I was thrown into this world as Romeo. And you can imagine, I thought, oh my goodness me, I'm going to be having to get affectionate with a girl that wasn't my girlfriend, etc., etc. But, you know, I had to pull off the role. And we had our moments of sheer humor when you're in these roles. But it was a serious play, and it had four themes that I've never forgotten, really. Obviously, love is a major theme, but it's not just one type of love. It's love, brotherly love, it's parental love, it's, you know, physical love and all that sort of stuff. So it's all of those type of elements there. And that is the main theme of it. However, in that period, there was a great aspect of fate that we had to understand, that the people in that period believed in fate. They feel they were destined, that life was written, that their choices couldn't really be changed. And you think, well, what's the purpose of that? And to take that all in as a young guy of 17 is quite hard. Then you've got the theme of death, of course, and the theme of time. If Romeo and Juliet had mobile phones, my goodness, they could have saved the problem, because the effect of time is catastrophic on the whole tragic events. But you've got several characters merging through all of this play that have a part in the downfall of both Romeo and Juliet, which is what it is. At the end of the play, you've got all the young generation laid out. I think we have 5 people that have their lives taken, and if you can work those out, you've learned Shakespeare. Basically, it's Romeo, it's Juliet, it's Paris, it's Tybalt, and it's Mercutio. And there's only 2 young people left from that generation that are part of the main characters, and that's Benvolio and Rosaline. And so you've got this kind of end that solves the crisis, but the price is so high of young love. And throughout the play, we get sort of insights into what goes wrong. You get the typical archetypal bully, the bully in the playground, Tybalt, who's almost like a headless chicken in the play. And he had to play this kind of, he was a person who had followers. He didn't seem to have friends. I mean, if you can name one friend of Tybalt, you can't really. What you've got are followers. They probably were ruled by fear. Whereas Romeo had friends. He had Benvolio and he had Mercutio, who covered his back. And Mercutio was a bit of a Jack the Lad, out and about, and typical young, sort of growing teenage sort of person who likes to party and go out and do all the things that young people like to do. But the relationship between Romeo and Juliet was an absolute no-no. It's a bit like crossing the line. And it's ironic that Romeo, at the beginning, when he goes and gate crashes the Capulets ball, he had gone there to actually follow up and chat up Rosaline. But no, he notices this beautiful young lady coming on the scene, and that's it. He's smitten, and he's now crossed the line. And so the whole play is about their relationship, clandestine meetings. And in those days, the parents were wanting to pick the person their daughter married. And this is, it's like arranged marriages that still go on today. So it's Romeo and Juliet is a play that captivates young people. And it's probably one of the best plays ever. Shakespeare was way ahead of his time. He put in people like, I suppose, mediators. I mean, the friar I would see as somebody who actually welcomed the collaboration and the meeting of Romeo and Juliet, because he thought that would bring all the families together, because he's a man of a religious man that brings people together and bases love on, it doesn't matter where you're from. So it was that. And then we get other characters that kind of have their allegiances. We get the nurse, who's kind of like a second mum to Juliet. So her mother was very much dominate. Her mother, Lady Capulet, was more dominated by Lord Capulet, and obviously that was the situation, the patriarchal state of the times, and a lot of those times still haven't changed as we speak. So the whole play is based on the feud, the problems, and it's a disaster. Now, it's hard for me to play this because, to be honest, it was a very personal time for me. In that very month, unfortunately, my dad had passed away. So when I was playing the role of Romeo, I had that raw emotion that took me a long way. As a result of me playing in Romeo and Juliet, I suddenly was catapulted into the National Youth Theatre and started thinking this could be a way forward for me in my career, in playing roles and drama and whatever else. But I had many other things I wanted to do as well. But the point about it is, now that I teach a lot of English and I help people understand Shakespeare. You know, Shakespeare was clever. The language is difficult to understand, but you've got to understand that the audience that would be watching were pretty much illiterate. So it's the way they moved. It was the actions, the body language, how you would say words that made them more sort of understandable and relatable. And it's about a young girl who actually said to his to her mother and her father about Paris, who they wanted to dump on her. And she would say, you know, the mother would ask Juliet, can you love the man? She says, well, I don't know the man. I don't know him. You know, and it's almost as if say, look, I want to choose who I end up with. And of course she did. And the tragic moments at the end that are gripping, where Juliet is pretending to be not alive at the end, and Romeo doesn't know that. He really thinks that she has died, and the communication is so poor. And these star-crossed lovers, the fate, all this thing about, you know, star-crossed lovers was a reference to fate, and that, you know, it was destined. And of course, at the end, to play the role of Romeo and to play the scene, the dying scene, was very, very, very hard, but it was really quite a statement that you could use. Now, I have produced for people in my shop, and that I have what Romeo and Juliet is about, and that will give you a kind of an outline of what it is. But to play the role, you know, as Romeo, I had to learn how to fence. I had to use a proper sword, a foil as it was called, and I had to have stage fighting practice in that. So this was not a wishy-washy play. It was one that involved, you know, fighting. And of course, as Romeo, I dispatched Tybalt with a very clever move with a dagger in my sock, where he had me on the back and was about to finish me off, but I managed to get the dagger and give him the fatal wound. That was great fun. Doing the fight. It was a great fun, and it made it exciting. It made it really quite real. And you know, this is a thing about anything you do in a play or drama. Remember, when you're studying this at school, it's a play. It's not a text. It's not a text, it's a play. You have to act it out. You have to play the roles. You have to get into the roles. You can do it in your generational way now. You know, you just have to find the kind of the similarities of our generation today, when they're defiant and want to do something they want to do and it's not approved, and then they go out and sort of do what they shouldn't do. You know, this is just life. And it's a hard lesson. So I would love to, you know, for you guys to really get to know what Shakespeare is really about. Don't be put off by Shakespeare. It's a wonderful, wonderful, brilliant person who traveled around the world in 1560s, you know. This is 16th century, and yet he was way ahead of his time. You know, his things are relevant for today, about power, about conflict, about moral values, about family values, about how you must, you not abuse power. And I can go into things like Macbeth and all the others. They all have a message about life and society. The only difference is it took place in a different time. But unfortunately, I would say that we probably don't seem to have moved much further forward in the world today. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video and it has helped you and it gets you inspired a little bit more, don't be put off by Shakespeare. Shakespeare is one of the greatest things, and it's still going today, and everybody loves it around the world. Value it. You know, this is part of our culture, the British culture, and it spreads all across the world and it's taught all across the world. Anyway, thank you for your time, and subscribe if you want, send comments if you want, and check out some of the links at the bottom of this video.